How do you want to die? While standing somewhere in public and while being watched by several people just suddenly evaporate, causing large amounts of confusion. Old people, it's the rapture. Young people, it's the snap. The snap was just the rapture but faster. We call it the velocirapture. Praise to Raptor Jesus. In the country, on my porch facing the sunset in a gently rocking chair with an old loyal dog laying next to me, I die peacefully, having enjoyed my life and being at peace. Staked through the heart by the last descendant of a vampire hunting family who've been seeking revenge for generations. Belmont's bloody tears intensifies. There is no way to tell because she is lost in the land of sleep and he is too, and when they go there they never go together, and she is afraid this is also a preview of death, a place where there may be dreams but never love, never home, never a hand to hold yours when squadrons of birds flock across the burnt orange sun at the close of day. Lisa's story. That one hit me fucking hard, especially having my wife leave not too long ago. Sleeping alone and dreaming alone and knowing there is a place, sometimes, that has dreams and never love again is exactly how I feel death will be like, and I am terrified. After my father died, I had several dreams where we were together. In one dream, I think I was a child, and following him from the back. So I couldn't even see his face. But I could actually smell his own distinct smell as I followed him. In some of the dreams, it was somewhat frightening to be with him as I slowly came to remember he was dead, but some of these dreams were comforting. Paramedic here, I went to a beautiful DOA many years ago, an elderly lady who had passed in her sleep and was found by her daughter the next day. There she was, laying in bed with the covers pulled up, looking for all the world like she was just deeply asleep, aside of course from her color. She had her air conditioning running so the room was almost icy cold, which helped slow the obvious usual processes that can turn a deceased person quite stinky quite rapidly in a tropical environment. The only thing that spoiled it was that she had a book opened and face down on her beside table. You're not supposed to touch anything at these scenes, but I couldn't resist checking the book as it appeared to be almost finished. She had just started the last chapter, she didn't get to finish her book. After that lovely story, I shall ruin the vibe by clarifying that these sorts of DOAs are very much in the minority. Most people die suddenly, talking natural causes here, while they are awake and doing things. Most of those aren't so pretty. I have been to hundreds of sudden deaths and believe me, it's not pretty, and most of the time in a very awkward place. I had a new start with me for training, and at the end of the day they said I always thought people pass in bed. No, they don't. I want it to be slow, long, and horrendously painful. And I want to see it coming. I want it to be so terrible that I will want to die just to make it stop. Honestly, I think I'd like to be poisoned, preferably with one that is quick and not too painful. There's an air of drama and mystery to being poisoned that I love. Who poisoned me? How did they get close enough to me to commit the dastardly act of slipping the poison into my food? Was I a spy? The victim of a scorned lover? Having an affair with a high-ranking government official that I tried to blackmail? Who knows? You also get the added element of it often not being obvious at first, which amplifies the intrigue. Maybe if I get really lucky it can be a poison that's only made in some bunker in the Russian mountains. A man can dream. Does a poison like that exist? I want to be killed saving somebody's life. I want to go out a hero. Peacefully and, in the hospital bed, not feeling pain, with all the people I love, and getting to say goodbye. And love you. To everyone. My dad died recently of an undiagnosed heart attack and half a week in the hospital. He couldn't breathe on his own and was stuffed with painkillers, but I believe he was so thankful that my mom, my brother, and me were there when they turned off the machines. I'm pretty sure he was conscious in a way, because he tried to open his eyes when we talked. We all held him and told him that he did a good job as a dad, and honestly it made me think about how I never want to die alone. Edit. Thank you all for your very kind words and also the awards. I didn't even think so many people would read this comment. I watched a documentary recently and the doctor had been asked how she would want to die. She replied, "I'd like to have my health and live till 100 with all the people I love still around me. And then I'd like to magically turn back into a baby and die in my mother's arms because there is not a place in the world with more peace and unconditional love. My mom died when I was 24. And honestly, dying in her loving arms would be the most beautiful and peaceful way I could ever hope to imagine." Edit, thank you for the awards but they aren't necessary. I'm just glad it touched so many people as it did myself. I hope we can all pass from this life onto the great beyond held in love, at peace, and surrounded by memories. This is so beautiful. I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I haven't seen mine in around 2 years now and it's definitely painful. That being said, I had a different answer in my head before I read your comment and now I'm going to change my answer to in my mom's arms. But with the stipulation that she feels no sorrow when I go. Just to be that guy, but wouldn't that peaceful death in your mother's arms be terrifying for your mother, hence making it less peaceful? That was actually the subject of the documentary Pediatric Palliative Care. The doctor was advocating for normalizing that sometimes people die. And those people happen to be children. And that we should make sure their families get the support they need to face it with reality, and in so doing honor the child's quality of life and memory the best possible way, as opposed to being in denial or fed false hopes in an untenable situation. I've worked in inpatient palliative/hospice care for a little over 2 years as an RN. A lot of people don't realize how much of my time and effort is given to family. End-of-life care patients, while they still require work, are much less direct work than the patient down the hallway requiring a blood transfusion and initiation of their chemotherapy treatment. Their families, however, are basically patients in their own right. There is a lot of guidance, love, and emotional support to give as the end of the process draws near. Personally, I think that once we have established a self-sustaining colony in another system, humanity will last forever. It would take an event of unimaginable levels of destruction across a swatch of space reaching light years. But until we reach that milestone and are stuck on just Earth, or even just within our solar system on other planets or moons, we are stuck with extinction as a possible outcome, whether it be of our own doing via global climate change from our constant pollution or war, or from cosmic events beyond anyone's control, or aliens coming to colonize our solar system for resources and wiping us out in the process of terraforming the planet to be livable for them. Evolutionarily speaking, by the time we venture out beyond Earth and the solar system, it could be over hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Humanity as we know it will cease to exist. It can evolve and branch out into several dozen, or, depending on the range of our extraplanetary and extrasolar exploration, hundreds of different distinct successor species. Due to the effects of solar and galactic radiation, zero gravity, different strengths of alien planets' gravity, technological gene editing, and general natural genetic drift will give rise to physiologically and genetically distinct populations who may have Homo sapiens as ancestors, but will be entirely separate species. Here's the thing. Genome editing of more complex life, including humans, is not as distant as you might think. CRISPR has serious potential for that, even the potential to correct genetic abnormalities like chromosomal defects. Even Down syndrome could simply be prevented if we can develop a way to trigger the mutation in every cell of an embryo. Humans have already reached the point where natural evolution has been overpowered by our vanity and societal ideals. Nurture has begun to triumph over nature, and it is more apparent every generation. We have already advanced our genetic manipulation from basic selective breeding for desirable traits, breeding wolves into dogs, chickens to lay eggs more often, cows as an entire species, to straight-up DNA splicing corn to make it resistant to more extreme climates and pests while also making it more nutritious. I'm fairly confident we could adapt extraterrestrial plants and animals into something fully compatible with our needs with some talented genetic engineers and researchers and a decent budget. Hell, I'd eat an alien fruit that's been genetically modified to be edible just as comfortably as I would bite into a PAB-grown steak. Still, eating alien fruit and living in alien atmospheres and gravity will eventually change humanity. Maybe not as dramatic as several distinct subspecies, but it should end up being way more distinct than our current ethnic differences, right? Humanity may not naturally reproduce anymore. If you could guarantee your child would be smart, talented, attractive, immune to almost all ailments and would be resilient to mental illness, would you? Imagine if you chose to make them naturally, but almost everyone was artificial. Your child would be incredibly stupid, weak and ugly compared to artificial. In that case, humanity would cease seeing random mutations and would genetically stagnate. The thing is, simply by nature of genetic drift and the founder effect, a human extrasolar colony would inevitably result in humans on Earth being distinct enough genetically to humans on said colony that they'd be two different species. The only way to avoid this, essentially, would be if there is enough intermingling between populations that the founder effect doesn't apply. But that would require that humanity be able to move between star systems within a reasonable, not over many lifetimes, time frame, which itself would necessitate that humanity develop FTL travel, which is impossible given our current understanding of physics. Which features are being chosen through our vanity? I realize almost everyone will need major dental work and braces in a couple generations, but what else have you noticed? Hate to break it to you that Down syndrome cannot be cured via CRISPR. First of all, CRISPR lets you cut and paste a small section of DNA, it can't delete an entire chromosome. Second, even if that could work, you would have to be using IVF because you'd need to make that change immediately, definitely before implantation. The symptoms of Down syndrome wouldn't just disappear when the extra chromosome does, so in order to completely eliminate all effects it would have to be done before any development had taken place. If using IVF already, you will be creating multiple embryos because they always try to make extra, since many times the first round of IVF fails and they don't want to have to do another egg extraction. Genetic testing is already done on those embryos, and any with chromosomal abnormalities would be discarded. I did not really know the details of how CRISPR works and what it can and cannot do. That was really interesting and enlightening. So we would be like the predecessors to a Star Wars-esque universe where there are different humanoid species stretching across multiple planets and solar systems in the galaxy, except there will be no force and all of them came from us. So, were the aliens. If you're interested in all this, I highly recommend you read the book Last and First Man by Olaf Stapledon. It talks about the speculative evolution of mankind over the next millions of years. Thanks for the Rico. I'm going to check it out. Something I often think about is if we did begin to colonize other systems, I really don't think we would be one unified federation or something. I hate seeming like a pessimist, but we are animals and we are bound to what we are. I don't think we will ever get much more organized than we already are. When I stop to think about it, the level that we are already is astounding, more than could have been expected of us. Yet despite that, it seems like we are already near a wall of just how well we can coordinate and work together. Imagine Canada, Iran, France, North Korea, Sweden, and Madagascar all being unified under one government. Now imagine that, but spread over light years, planets and people that are drastically different. Tech limitations aside, how could we ever be actually unified like that? If you look back on ancient civilizations, and vast empires stretching hundreds or even thousands of miles, it was very rare for them to be unified for long. A couple of 100 years is a brief time when taking into account how long civilizations have been around. Until the Roman Empire, any large empire built on subjugation and conquest eventually fractured and crumpled, or was in turn conquered. The Achaemenid Empire only lasted less than 300 years. The Mongolian conquests really only lasted about 100 years, before they fractured. Unified culture, even at the point of the sword, was nearly impossible over long distances. And here's the kicker, those distances only took weeks to months to traverse. Now, imagine having to keep cultures, genetics, physiology consistent over light years, where even with our fastest imagined practical ships take decades to centuries to physically spread humanity. I mentioned the Roman, even they split the empire in separate administrative halves eventually, empire because they improved upon previous conquering cultures by building a vast network of roads which cut down the amount of time it took for messengers and armies to get from one end of the empire to the other. We would need to develop FTL propulsion, space folding jump technology, stable wormholes, or discover some previously unconsidered form of hyperspace transit network, think Babylon 5 and Star Wars, to connect humanity and human culture without the time drift. Even if any of those methods are possible, give enough time, there will be subtle at first, but eventually unmistakable fractures in the definitions of humanity. If you ever felt something really cold like dry ice, then I would imagine it is like that, a burning sensation. He must be right. Have you ever held ice for an extended period of time? It does burn, but if you keep holding the ice eventually you lose all feeling. Also, in some tests made to people that feel no fear in a wide variety of tests even when exposed to pain, they had a different brain structure. The only way they got to instill fear into them was to deprive them of oxygen while using previous methods. Turns out that is the scariest thing a human can experience, is your worst or any fear that gets amplified by the lack of oxygen. But my guess is that drowning in cold water numbs the senses and that's why it feels peaceful, but otherwise if you're conscious and afraid I can imagine that being the worst last minutes a human can experience. I'm assuming it was someone who had an incredible story. I can't think of what character would have such a story to deserve being on the throne. The boar that killed King Fat Ass and started all this. It comes full circle. Hello, I come from an alternate reality where they finished the show. Jon Snow wound up with the throne after an epic battle with Daenerys and her forces, 2 years after they defeated the White Walkers together. Jon defeated the Night King in single combat, and when Daenerys became a tyrant upon taking the throne, he leads a rebellion with Theon Greyjoy's help, successfully overthrowing the Dragon Queen and handing Theon the Iron Islands. Sansa becomes Warden of the North, and Arya becomes the new Master of Whispers after Varys retires to help fund and run Tyrion's vineyard. Sandor wins Clegane Ebol and moves to the countryside to live the rest of his days in peace. And Cersei is unceremoniously stabbed to death by Jaime, who comes to his senses and realizes how awful she is. By accident, by taking something. Accidental overdose or medications reacting badly, etc. An opioid and a benzo. That'll put you right to sleep. This is kinda messed up, but I used to have a real bad problem with opiates. I overdosed really bad once in a motel and someone told me I didn't have a pulse for a decent minute and I was blue. They did CPR on me for about 20 minutes and I came back somehow. But I try and think back to what I remember and I literally remember it like I fell asleep. I remember going, damn, that shot was really good dash, and that was it. In a completely unexpected instant. But if I get a terminal illness, I'm going out in style. Rent a Corvette, buy a shitload of blow, get ridiculously high, and drive off a fucking cliff. Impending death by terminal illness is my one permissible time I give myself to do heroin. If I'm gonna die, I might as well do it in a state of absolute euphoria. I wonder if some people actually do that. The thing is, most people that make it to an age at which they can have a terminal illness, are usually not the biggest risk takers if they made it that far. People tend to die the way they live their lives. If you made it to 30 without any problems, chances are you are going to live much longer. In my bed, dying peacefully in my sleep 1 month after my 100th birthday. Right now in the arms of my girlfriend who just left me. I would die of happiness if she comes and hold me. When I was younger I fantasized dying the middle of a battle, fighting for a cause. Now I know I'd probably die of something like cancer, so with that said I'd rather go out on my own terms. Drugged the hell up doing all the drugs I was told to stay away from. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, Subscribe and comment Reddit Story Time for more Reddit stories.